Carpenters Ministry presents this refreshing and life-changing teaching. We trust that this message will be a blessing to you.
Amen. Glory be to God. Glory be to God. Glory be to God. Amen and amen. These are the times to be living in this country. Amen. For many, many decades, we have preached faith, hope for our nation from this pulpit, right from the time of Pastor Charles. And I know that we as a church have believed that a day would come in this country where things would be different. Many times when you are trusting God for something, anything, everything seems to be saying the complete opposite. But I believe that Nigeria is a faith project evolving right before our eyes. And I believe that we will learn lessons of faith, lessons of persevering, even in the storm, from what we are privileged to walk through in the nation at this time. Glory be to God. A sister said to me recently, Pastor, most of your messages on National Day are like speeches or addresses. And I realized that that's actually what's been happening for a while. And today, again, I've got an address to make to the church. And I believe that it is the word of the Lord for us at this time. I received the topic of the address about 2 months ago, and I've been meditating it since then. And for about 2 or 3 days, I put it down. The title of my address today in our National Day service is When Structures and Systems Fail. When structures and systems fail. I'll begin with definitions. What is a structure? A structure means anything composed of parts arranged together in some way, an organization. Systems means a coordinated body of methods or a scheme or plan of procedure, organizational scheme. Even when structures and systems are corrupt and carry out nefarious activities, they can still be organized with visible hierarchical structure and even a working constitution. A good example is the Italian mafia, that is structured, organized crime. What is organized crime? Organized crime means criminal activities that are planned and controlled by powerful groups and carried out on a large scale. Section B, political structures and systems in Nigeria. The political arena in Nigeria is made up of political structures and systems that have evolved into mega corrupt institutions. These structures and systems are populated by recycled politicians with an amazing gift of longevity. These are structures and systems in our nation that have obsessively controlled the political climate of our nation, Nigeria, for decades. As far as many can remember, this was the norm of Nigerian politics. These structures and systems negotiated, collaborated, and determined who held government offices, oftentimes all the way from the grassroots to the presidency. They were seemingly infallible and impossible to exist without. However, Nigeria, by definition, is a democratic republic. What is democracy by definition? Democracy means government by the people, especially rule of the majority, a government in which the supreme power is vested in the people and exercised by them directly or indirectly through a system of representation, usually involving periodically held free elections. It is therefore ironic that in building and maintaining these structures and systems in Nigeria, many factors such as ethnicity, religion, financial power, political connections, rotation, and past experience within the structure and system were of primary consideration. Most of these considerations are alien to a democratic political process, which is meant to have only one major consideration, and one alone, in shaping the political arena, and that is the unfettered will of the people. C, can political structures and systems fail in Nigeria? When structures and systems have lasted a long time, they become entrenched in the culture and mentality of the people that are subject to their activities. The people fashion their thoughts, their dreams, possibilities, and actions around what is permissible by the structure or the system. If the structure does not permit or authorize it, then the dream must die or be killed. The merit of any vision, the measure of the future, is automatically limited to what the structure or system permits. Such people are kept in bondage and trained mentally to be dependent in every way on the existing structure and system. It is mental slavery at best, which becomes total slavery, as people who are mentally enslaved will permanently live below their potential. In such scenarios, change is like a curse word, or at best seen as wishful thinking by a daring few. Change is an impossible concept to consider. True liberty can only come outside of the usual structure or system, or with a complete destruction of the usual. The latter is more difficult to believe for. The structures and systems are built to resist the former. God has told us since 2017 to expect the shift. We have started seeing the shift in the ministry and in the Church of Jesus Christ in general. And I believe we're about to see it in Nigeria. The shift is here. He told us in 2020, in a prophetic word I delivered on the 4th of October, to be precise, that at 60, Nigeria was overdue for a generational shift. Some salient points we remember from that message were: no single generation in Israel had the monopoly of the blessing. Likewise, no single generation or ethnic group in Nigeria has the monopoly of leadership in this nation. To prepare for the generational shift, the old generation must empower the new generation. The old generation must let go. The old generation must be held accountable. And the old generation must be separated from the new. 3 weeks after this prophetic message, we saw the greatest movement of the youths in our country has ever seen. I believe God was announcing in that message that the shift had already come to our nation. The mental stronghold was being broken. As a church, we began to intensively wage a good warfare for our nation with the prophetic word he had sent to us. We began to uphold and sustain the generational shift in our prayers with weekly intercession, which many of you did not attend. Some of you did. Glory be to God for those of you who did. Weekly intercession online, and then it became monthly intercession, praying for our country. This is more important and impactful than adding to the noise without exercising your authority where it matters most. Other saints nationwide and globally also intensified their prayers as a silent underground army. Warfare in prayer is necessary because the greatest stronghold in the political arena in Nigeria are these political structures and systems. A time comes, however, when even the strongest structures and systems are shaken from the very foundation, and they will eventually fail. Acts 16, 26 to 30. We see a story there. Suddenly there was a great earthquake, so the foundations of the prison were shaken, and immediately all the doors were opened, and everyone's chains were loosed. And the keeper of the prison, awaking from sleep and seeing the prison doors open, supposing the prisoners had fled, drew his sword and was about to kill himself. But Paul called with a loud voice, saying, "Do yourself no harm, for we are all here." Then he called for a light, ran in and fell down, trembling before Paul and Silas. And he brought them out and said, "Sirs, what must I do to be saved?" Whenever a shaking takes place from the foundation, chains are broken, and the purpose of the shaking is often unclear and received with doubt and suspicion. However, something new is about to be born. Let us now begin to explore 4 things that happen when structures and systems fail. As we study some structures and systems in the Word of God, in the Bible, which is our reference for life, I will leave you at the end of this message, and from what we see in the current political arena in Nigeria, to decide for yourself whether the impossible is indeed possible, and whether structures and systems are crumbling from the very foundation in our nation. D, what happens when structures and systems fail? Point number 1, A. When structures and systems fail, experience within the system, within the structure, becomes irrelevant. When structures and systems fail, experience within the structure becomes irrelevant. Experience on its own is not a bad thing. It is actually required for good leadership, as the Bible itself demands that a novice, an inexperienced person, be kept far away from leadership. 1 Timothy 3, verses 1 and verse 6. This is a faithful saying: if a man desires the position of a bishop, he desires a good work. Verse 6, not a novice. Everyone say novice. Lest being puffed up with pride, he falls into the same condemnation as the devil. It's interesting, however, that the same Paul said to the same Timothy in the next chapter, "Let no one despise your youth, but be an example to the believers in word, in conduct, in love, in spirit, in faith, in purity." Both words, novice and youth, have the same root in the Greek. This tells me that the concept of newness, listen, and thus the concept of experience must be seen in context. There is good experience and there is bad experience. There is a type of newness that may be despised, but is actually desired. There is also a type of experience that becomes irrelevant, undesirable, and is actually a disadvantage. When experience is limited to a structure or a system that has failed the people and is still failing, then that experience is irrelevant to the shift, to the new move. For example, a mafia boss who is a don in organized crime is experienced in the mafia system. Does that make him the best candidate for an elected position in the country? Certainly not. Yet many times, organized crime is interwoven into politics in many nations of the world, and Nigeria is not an exception. To protect the territory that has been acquired, political structures and systems will resist any form of change from the outside. It is natural human nature to defend what you consider your space. The resistance is intuitive and actually a mental block that says nobody except us has the right to hold any office. The mantra of such irrelevant experience is, we have always done it, we will always do it, so nobody else can know what to do, or nobody else can do it. Even when we know we don't know what to do, we must do it because it belongs to us within the structure. Case study, David and Goliath. The structure of the army of Israel had failed to deliver security to the people of Israel. They were tormented and humiliated by the Philistines and their champion Goliath. They were helpless. 1 Samuel 17, verses 11, 16, and 24. 11 tells us they were dismayed and greatly afraid. 16 tells us the Philistine presented himself 40 days, every day and night. 24 tells us the men fled from him and they were dreadfully afraid. So you see, the nation of Israel is under attack day and night. The authorities are paralyzed with terror. The people are equally terrified. The structure and the system has failed. Should the king and the army not be desperate to save the nation with anyone who can deliver them? Apparently they are not. This crisis describes the state of Nigeria today with the most uncanny accuracy. David is a young shepherd boy, not a soldier. He's not in the system, yet he shows up announcing boldly and fearlessly that he had the answer. They immediately resist his involvement, giving flimsy reasons. 1 Samuel 17, 26, 28 to 29, 31 to 33. 28 shows us that Eliab, his elder brother, said, I was angry and said to David, why did you come down here? With whom have you left those few sheep in the wilderness? I know your pride and your insolence in your hearts because you have come down to see this battle. And David said, what have I done now? Is there not a cause? Is there not a cause? Church, is there not a cause? And when the words which David spoke were heard, they reported to Saul, and he sent for him. Then David said to Saul, let no man's heart fail because of him. Your servant will go and fight this Philistine. And Saul said to David, you are not able to go against this Philistine to fight with him, for you are a youth and a man of war, and he is a man of war from his youth. Eliab reminded him that he was a mere shepherd boy and not a soldier. This was more than sibling rivalry, as the entire army echoed the same thing. King Saul despised his youth and celebrated Goliath, the enemy of the nation, because he was not a novice, an experienced soldier within the system he understood. They all belonged to the same structure. They had the same thinking. They could not save the nation that was under attack, yet they did not recognize the deliverer the nation needed had come. 1 Samuel 17, 34 to 37. David began to give his CV. David said to Saul, your servant used to keep his father's sheep. And when a lion or a bear came and took a lamb out of the flock, I went after it and struck it and delivered the lamb from its mouth. And when it arose against me, I caught it by its beard and struck and killed it. Your servant has killed both lion and bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, seeing he has defied the armies of the living God. Moreover, David said, the Lord who delivered me from the paw of the lion and from the paw of the bear, he will deliver me from the hand of this Philistine. And Saul said to David, go, and the Lord be with you. David said, indeed, I am experienced, but not in the methods you are used to. I am experienced, but not in the methods you are used to. Then he went to show his proven experience in courage, in competence, and in character. That was what mattered and what the nation needed. His inexperience in the methods of Saul's army was actually an advantage. Saul still had not received the paradigm shift. Saul still had a mental block. Even if David would be the one, then he had to be absorbed into the structure or system. For in his mind, winning belonged to him. So winning can only occur from within his own army. So what did Saul do? 1 Samuel 17:38. And Saul clothed David with his armor. He put a bronze helmet on his head. He clothed him with a coat. David fastened his sword to his armor and tried to walk, for he had not tested them. And David said to Saul, I cannot walk with these, for I have not tested them. So David took them off. David refused to become a clone. He refused to let go of the very thing that was his advantage. We know the end of the story. He dealt with the enemy and chopped off his head and rescued the nation. It is only after that that Saul bothered to ask who David really was. Case study 2, Ahimaaz and Cush. Again, the nation was in distress. The king's son was dead, and someone needed to carry the news. Cush had the information and ability, so Joab sent him. He decided to give him a chance. This story is in 2 Samuel 18. Ahimaaz didn't have the solution to the crisis on ground, but he insisted on running the race. Why? Because Ahimaaz was the usual runner. We know this because when he eventually ran towards the king, they recognized him from a distance. That person is running like Ahimaaz. So they knew him. He was the system and the structure they were used to. If he didn't run, who would? The fact that he was an empty vessel meant nothing to him. So he ran. And he actually got there faster than Cush. Verse 28, 2 Samuel 18. Ahimaaz arrived and called out to the king, all is well. He bowed down with his face to the earth before the king and said, blessed be the Lord your God, who has delivered of the men who raised their hand against my lord the king. And the king asked the question, is the young man Absalom safe? Ahimaaz answered, when Job sent the king's servant and me, your servant, I saw a great multitude, but I did not know what it was about. The king said, turn aside and stand here. So he turned aside and stood still. And then the Cushites came. And the Cushites said, there is good news, my lord the king, for the Lord has avenged you this day of all those who rose against you. And the king said to the Cushite the same question, is the young man Absalom safe? And the Cushite answered, may the enemies of my lord the king and all who rise against you do harm be like that young man. As they arrived at the end of the race, the man with the solution was Cush, and Ahimaaz was put aside. Church, in 2023, our prayer and our declaration is that the presidential candidate with the solutions for the crisis and distress of our nation, Nigeria, will be elected. All others will be put aside. B, when structures and systems fail, evil forces of darkness are overcome. When you have an organized structure in the world system, it is overtly or covertly backed by the forces of darkness. This is mostly seen when the structure is geared at money making. Even when originally the system was not corrupted. Even when originally the system was not corrupted, there is a tendency for evil to creep in and redefine the structure once money is involved. No wonder Jesus said in Luke 16, 13, you cannot serve God and the power of money at the same time. That's the Phillips translation. You cannot serve God and the power of money at the same time. Religious groups, trade organizations, corporate businesses, banking groups, political parties are all potentially complicit We see a good example in Acts 19. Case study. Demetrius and the evil worship of Diana. Acts 19:23 to 29. I'm reading from the Phillips. Please listen. Now it happened about this time that a great commotion arose considering the way. A man by the name of Demetrius, a silversmith, who made silver shrines for Diana, provided considerable business for his craftsmen. He gathered these men together with workers in similar trades and spoke to them. Men, he said, you all realize how our prosperity depends on this particular work. Say that after me. Our prosperity depends on this particular work. If you use your eyes and ears, you also know that not only in Ephesus, but practically throughout Asia, this man Paul has succeeded in changing the minds of a great number of people by telling them, if you use your eyes and ears, you will also know that not only in Ephesus, but practically throughout Asia, this man Paul has succeeded in changing the minds of a great number of people by telling them that the gods made by human hands are not gods at all. Now the danger is not only that this trade of ours might fall into disrepute, but also that the temple of the great goddess Diana herself might come to be lightly regarded. Demetrius and the other craftsmen like him were businessmen. They ran an organized union with a structure that revealed that he was probably the leader of the union. Their main commodity was the silver shrines, idols, and memorabilia they made and sold for Diana. The worship of Diana, the goddess, was not an ordinary religion. It was evil and immoral. The priests of Diana were said to be castrated while they watched worshippers engage in sexual orgies. It was good business for Demetrius and his group. Their livelihood and property depended on these evil practices. They cared nothing about the worship of Diana, but would do anything to retain it, as it put money in the bank for them. Note that his primary concern was that Paul had changed the minds of many people with the truth. If the mental stronghold was broken and the people were free, their business would no longer be financially profitable. The Nigerian political structures and systems are not different, with unspoken stories of evil forces on our political landscape. It is a sad practice that ritual killings and kidnappings go on the rise in election season. What is the common denominator? Evil. Isaiah 10, verse 1 to 4 from the ERV. Just look at those lawmakers who write evil laws and make life hard for the people. They are not fair to the poor. They take away the rights of the poor and allow people to steal from widows and orphans. Lawmakers, you will have to explain what you have done. What will you do then? Your destruction is coming from a faraway country. Where will you run for help? Your money and your riches will not help you. You will have to bow down like a prisoner. You will fall down like a dead man, but that will not help you. God will still be angry and ready to punish you. There are career politicians within the political structures in Nigeria today who have a political career interwoven with evil practices. They have nothing to offer the nation, but because their prosperity, that should be nothing. They have nothing to offer the nation, but because their prosperity depends on this particular work, Politics is their bread and butter. They have no other, so they must desperately keep their positions at all costs. When structures and systems fail, these forces of darkness are threatened and eventually overcome by the one force that breaks the hold of evil, the combined force of a righteous man's prayer and faith. James 5:16 from the Amplified. Confess to one another, therefore, your faults, your slips, your false steps, your offenses, your sins, and pray also for one another, that you may be healed and restored to a spiritual tone of mind and heart. The earnest, heartfelt, continued prayer of a righteous man makes tremendous power available, dynamic in its working. That is the force Paul brought to Ephesus and dealt with Demetrius, the same way he had dealt with the slave girl earlier. Elijah brought that same force at Mount Carmel, and the prophets of Baal, whom King Ahab was in compromise with, were publicly disgraced by the same force. Moses and Aaron brought the same force to the palace of Pharaoh, and the magicians and sorcerers of Pharaoh were humiliated. This is what we do when the church prays and steps out in faith for our nation. We are righteous. Our words and our actions of faith make tremendous power available, dynamic in its working. There are great prayers to pray from the word of God for this country. Psalm 33:10-12. The Lord brings the counsel of the nations to nothing. He makes the plans of the people of no effect. The counsel of the Lord stands forever, the plans of his heart to all generations. Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, the people he has chosen as his own inheritance. Job 5:12-16. He frustrates the devices of the crafty so that their hands cannot carry out their plans. Any plans to rig elections, any plans for violence, he frustrates the devices of the crafty so that their hands cannot carry out their enterprise. Any plans to import people from other countries to vote, any plans to get animals to vote, he frustrates the devices of the crafty so that their hands cannot carry out their plans. He catches the wise in their own craftiness, and the counsel of the cunning comes quickly upon them. They meet with darkness in the daytime and grope at noontime as in the night, but he saves the needy from the sword, from the mouth of the mighty and from their hand. So the poor have hope, and injustice shuts her mouth. Isaiah 8:8. Take counsel together, but it will come to nothing. Speak the word, but it will not stand. For God is with us. TCC, we decree that over our country, Nigeria, any candidate for any position, from president to local government, that actively engages in evil practices will be set aside, humiliated publicly, and brought to nothing in the name of Jesus Christ. See, when structures and systems fail, encounters of a God kind occur. We must never ignore the God factor. God gets personally involved in an inexplicable divine move of God, and the force of the divine shift interferes in the affairs of men. Daniel 4:32. And they shall drive you from men. It goes on to say, until you know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men and gives it to whomever he chooses. The Most High rules in the affairs of men, and he gives it to whosoever he chooses. In the kingdom of men, there is a king who is a man, who obviously thinks he's in charge. Always. God will let man rule over nations. However, he's still the sovereign God, with the exclusive preserve to divine intervention when he wants. We must never forget that. These divine interventions result in political disruptions. We see divine intervention play a part in many examples in the Bible where existing evil and corrupt structures and systems of rulership failed and crumbled to the ground. Case study, Moses, the deliverer of Israel. Write down Exodus 3:7-12 and Exodus 14:26-31. In verse 7, God said, I have surely seen the oppression of my people who are in Egypt, and I have heard their cry because of their taskmasters, for I know their sorrows. I have surely seen the oppression of my people who are in Nigeria. I have heard their cry because of their taskmasters, and I know their sorrows. Moses said to God, verse 11, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh, that I should bring the children of Israel out of Egypt? 26, the Lord said to Moses, stretch out your hand over the sea, that the waters may come back upon the Egyptians, on their chariots and their horsemen. And Moses stretched out his hand. However, look at verse 30. It is the Lord. Moses stretched out his hand, but he says the Lord saved Israel that day out of the hand of the Egyptians. And Israel saw the Egyptians dead on the seashore. Thus Israel saw the great work which the Lord had done in Egypt. So the people feared the Lord and believed the Lord and his servant Moses. The children of Israel were under oppression of Egypt, and the Lord, after several divine warnings, which Pharaoh refused to heed, the Lord miraculously intervened, and there was an encounter of the God kind. The entire structure of Egypt died in the Red Sea. Case study, Elijah and the prophets of Baal. King Ahab was the 7th king of Israel among the kings who were increasingly ruling away from God's principles. Ahab was a notoriously evil king. He violated basic principles of good leadership, yet he had the structure of a kingdom behind him. His confidence was in his evil bedfellows and connections, beginning with his wife Jezebel. She was a daughter of the foreign priest, King Ethbaal. Even his name, Ethbaal, speaks volumes. It literally means the one who is near to Baal. Baal was a Phoenician deity or god. Ahab had no business making Jezebel his bedfellow. He had no business with that connection. He was a king of Israel. Israel, the people of the one true God. His connections were unscrupulous, and his only focus was to keep his kingdom strong. That was his modus operandi. In the middle of this corrupt government of Ahab, listen, the children of Israel were affected. They could no longer discern between good and evil. They could not identify what was good and what was evil anymore. When a nation gets to that point, when its people can no longer discern between good and evil, it is a candidate for divine encounters of a God kind. Friends, is our country, Nigeria, at that point now? Are we so used to the political structures and systems that the people can no longer discern between what is obviously good and evil? 1 Kings 18:20-39. That's the whole story of Elijah at Mount Carmel. I won't read it all, just to read 2 verses. Verse 20. Ahab sent for all the children of Israel and gathered the prophets together on Mount Carmel. And Elijah, listen, came to all the people and said, how long will you falter between two opinions? How long will you dance between what is good and what is evil? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal, follow him. This is called the contest at Mount Carmel. Nkechi likes to call it the elections at Mount Carmel. Good and evil were on the ballot box. And the choice of God was made clear by a miraculous encounter of the God kind. No one was in doubt where God stood on the matter. Baal and his worshippers were publicly disgraced. In these two case studies, Moses and Elijah, and many others like it, 4 things are constant in divine intervention and encounters of the God kind. First, the nation was in dire crisis, dire distress. Second, the people needed help, and someone or all of them cried out to God. Nigeria is in crisis. Even a blind man can see it. Friends, the prayer of the church is invaluable in our nation now as a cry that God hears and responds to. 3, God chooses a man. God chose a man to do the work to free the people. And there is usually nothing, absolutely nothing special about this superhero that God chooses. Moses didn't think much of himself. Elijah had some tendencies that were far from perfect. But the Bible says in Psalm 2:4-6, reading verse 6, ERV, I have chosen this man to be king. 1 Corinthians 1:27, God has chosen the foolish things of the world to put to shame the wise. And God has chosen the weak things of the world to put to shame the things that are mighty. Like we read in Isaiah 52, verse 2, Jesus, the ultimate superhero, had nothing special about him in his humanity. 4, the glory will always go to God. D, when structures and systems fail, endless questions finally begin to get solved. When structures and systems fail, endless questions finally begin to get solved. Whenever there is a stronghold of structures and systems, there are perennial puzzles. Nigeria's political arena is not different. Questions such as, why is it impossible for a country of 280 million people? Why is it impossible for us to provide basic light and water? Basic electricity and water in 2022. There are children who are teenagers who have never put on a tap and seen water run except there's a borehole in the house. And they're teenagers now. They have never seen water run. Why? Why is insecurity rising at an alarming rate from north to south, east to west? Kidnapping is now a career. Why? Why is the naira sliding down the ladder so fast? Why is education now a luxury in Nigeria? Why should young promising adults in higher institutions be out of school for months on end? Why is good health care literally impossible to receive? Why should all of this be when we are some of the smartest bunch of people on this planet? Wherever you plant Nigerians, we prosper. Wherever we go straight to the top. Even if you went to some village primary school and you make your way to where the opportunities, you end up being the head there. So why? And these are perennial puzzles, endless puzzles that no one has been able to answer. Questions. Those oppressed could only think in their thoughts, but not dare to utter, as no obvious solution was within reach. Who has the answers? We have seen today so far that inexperience in patterns of corruption, bold righteousness standing against evil, and simple availability as the channel chosen by God, all come together to provide answers to questions that have plagued a failing structure. Case study, Joseph and Pharaoh. Genesis 41, 14 to 16. Then Pharaoh sent and called Joseph, and they brought him quickly out of the dungeon. And he shaved, changed his clothing, and came to Pharaoh. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, listen, I have had a dream, and there is no one who can interpret it. I have heard it said of you that you can understand a dream to interpret it. So Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, it is not in me. God will give Pharaoh an answer of peace. Verse 37, so the advice was good in the eyes of Pharaoh and the eyes of all his servants. And Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find such a one like this, a man in whom is the Spirit of God? Pharaoh had questions. He had a dream and needed answers. By divine orchestration, a man called Joseph, with a proven record, showed up from the most unusual place, and he provided the answer. The most striking thing about Joseph's solution was that it was not rocket science. It was simple. Why had no one thought about it? They could not, because it was an answer of peace from God, given specifically to Joseph, his chosen one. Case study, Daniel and Nebuchadnezzar. Daniel 4, verse 4 to 7, 5, verse 7 to 8, and 5, 16 to 17. Nebuchadnezzar was at rest in my house and flourishing in my palace. I saw a dream which made me afraid, and the thoughts on my bed and the visions of my head troubled me. Therefore, I issued a decree to bring in all the wise men of Babylon before me, that they might make known to me the interpretation of the dream. Then the magicians, the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers came in, and I told them the dream, but they did not make known to me the interpretation. Verse 7, chapter 5. The king cried aloud to bring in the astrologers and all of them. He spoke, whoever reads this writing and tells me its interpretation shall be clothed with purple and have a chain of gold around his neck, and he shall be the third ruler in the kingdom. Now all the king's wise men came, but they could not read the writing or make known to the king its interpretation. Verse 16, and I've heard of you, that you can give interpretations and explain enigmas. That was what he had heard about Daniel. So here comes another king with questions. And all the existing wisdom within the kingdom, within the structure, failed to provide the answer. Daniel was God's man, and he could explain enigmas. He knew just where to go for the answers. He depended totally on God. Sometimes, by divine intervention, the answer is right before us, and we are blinded to it by our fears, our doubts, and our raw cynicism. Cynicism is defined as an inclination to question whether something will happen or whether it is worthwhile. It is pessimism. It is actually doubt. Sometimes it should be those who are close to the mess, those who created the crisis, that should be most eager for a redeeming solution to the mess. Yet they are often the most pessimistic about God's intervention. 2 Kings 7, verse 1, Elisha said, hear the word of the Lord. Thus says the Lord, tomorrow, about this time, a seah of fine flour shall be sold for a shekel, and 2 seahs of barley for a shekel at the gate of Samaria. Imagine if someone comes to say, hear the word of the Lord. By this time tomorrow, diesel will be 15 naira a liter. what reaction would you have? What response will you have? If you're among those who've been praying in faith, it will be obvious, those who say, who will do exactly what this man did. An officer on whose hand the king leaned, ADC, close to the king, answered the man of God and said, look, if the Lord will make windows in heaven, could this thing be? In fact, the man of God answered him, you shall see it with your eyes, but you shall not eat of it. That's not our portion. We will see the change and we will eat of it. Will we be like the political leader who was close to the king? As I come to the end of my address, I wish to categorically state that I do not endorse candidates in elections in Nigeria. However, as a prophet of the Most High God, I recognize a move of God, and I will always endorse a move of the Most High God. Of the 3 forerunners, out of the, I believe, 18 presidential candidates, there are 3 who are in front. Bola Ahmed Tinubu, if he is the move of God for our nation in 2023, then may he win. If Atiku Abubakar is the move of Almighty God for our nation in 2023, then may he win. If Peter Gregory Obi is the move of God for our nation in 2023, then may he win. The move of God for our nation will prevail. Friends, Nigeria, may we receive God's chosen president in 2023. Someone who would provide simple solutions by divine wisdom to the perennial puzzles that have identified our nation for decades. Conclusion. Structures and systems have been failing in recent times in the world. It is a sign of the times. Take a look at France. In the case of Emmanuel Macron, Gabriel Boric, 36 years old, was sworn in as president to herald a new era for Chile in South America. He becomes the youngest president of the country that is still living in the shadow of the Pinochet dictatorship. And more recently, in Kenya, William Ruto beat his rival, Raila Odinga, who is an experienced establishment politician, to become the president in a closely fought election right here in Africa. Are we about to see a similar political disruption in Nigeria? Are we about to see a similar political disruption in Nigeria? Are the political structures and systems we are so used to failing and falling right before us? You have the answer to that question as a citizen of our beloved country, Nigeria. Your answer will be heard as you take up your responsibility in the spiritual and physical realms. Take up your authority and commit to pray the will of God in these coming months. This is a very important time to pray. Your answer will be heard when you pray. Go and pick up your permanent voter's card and ensure you cast your vote on February 25, 2023. Your answer will also be heard. Thank you, and God bless Nigeria.